we've signed our expression of commitment, or many of you have that. So, what's really exciting is that the Fire Carer program was something that was basically just in Melbourne, in the Max Diocese, the Sandhurst Diocese. Every school in the Sandhurst Diocese is a fire carrier school. In the Max Diocese, it's an opt in, but it's really exciting this year. We're moving out into the Sale Diocese and the Ballarat Diocese. So, it would be really fantastic to be the day when every single Catholic school in Victoria was a fire carrier school. So we're working towards that, and we appreciate you coming on that journey with us. All right, so step by step. So the first thing you would have done is you would have heard about the fire carrier program somewhere, and that may be in different places. So it's a really exciting program, and we don't actually advertise it in the Melbourne Archdiocese. It seems word of mouth that goes around to people, and that people inquire because they've been to a PL session, or they've been to a wellbeing, or they've moved from one school to another, and they've gone to a school that isn't a fire carrier school and started it. I love it when I go to secondary schools and you see that there's kids coming from year seven into year seven from a primary school that was a fire carrier school, and then they've pushed for their secondary school to become a fire carrier school because it wasn't. So there's lots of information, and what I've tried to do as an ex-teacher is make it as simple as possible and have all those resources for you as easy as possible. So the new school information Dropbox, that folder will be sent out to the school, and that includes things like there's a PowerPoint presentation. It goes through different models for students and staff. It goes through compliance, so where the program fits with compliance. There's an information booklet. There's everything you sort of need to know about that first inquiring stage. So this is what you get. So that's sent out. And so the first year, so I've now added in the document that I've attached in the chat. So I've included in that is external and internal. So some of the things you'll be talking to myself, or you'd be talking to Peter if you're in Sale, or Jeanette and Helen if you're Ballarat, and it goes through all of those things. So lots of information there. You're welcome to download the PowerPoint, change it, delete, add, whatever you need to make it easier for you to present to staff. So once it's been signed by the principal, so the principal signs it first, and sometimes it's the principal that makes the expression of or the initial inquiry. Sometimes it's just another member of staff. And the important thing is having the principal sign that expression of commitment, because that means that it's a whole school commitment then. And so it looks a little bit like this. And so the school commits to developing the covenant. So that's your plan or structure or framework that allows you to chart where all your actions are going to be throughout the year. You're going to incorporate First Nations spirituality into the school's Catholic identity, make First Nations culture and knowledges visible in the whole school. And I find that I do that as a non-Aboriginal person. Whenever I walk into a school, I will have a look and see if what I can see. Is it just the flags out the front? It's really lovely when I walk into a fire carrier school and see their flame sitting right up the front, nice and proud. Improving cultural safety and awareness for all staff, students, and school community and visitors. So this is also really important if your First Nation families are part of your school community, as well as parents and people that come to do guest speaking, etc. Building relationships with the local First Nations community, and that's actually something that can be very, very hard at sometimes. But if it's something that you need to sort of work on year after year after year for the long haul. Celebrate significant dates and First Nation contributions, and support the Opening the Doors Foundation through awareness raising and fundraising. So it's a really important part of the Fire Carrier program, is to actually include the Opening the Doors Foundation and the awareness and fundraising. And it's the fundraising side of things, which I'll sort of go into a little bit later, but we only look at what your school is. So if you're a school with 100 students, we don't expect you to be raising the same amount of money as, a school with 1,000 students. And sometimes it's more the conversations and what you do, and your awareness raising of that. So the principal signs it, and then there's a school contact. So at the school. So that's the school fire carrier coordinator. So it can be the principal, but I find principals are usually got lots and lots of things to do during their day. So they might have someone else take the role of being that coordinator. And I'll go through that in a little bit too. And so that person is the point of contact for the Opening the Doors Foundation and myself as the fire carrier coordinator. A financial commitment, and I actually think it's quite a very reasonable financial commitment. So there's a joining fee and a yearly levy. So if you were starting at the beginning of the year, the joining fee is $400, and then the yearly levy is $400 for secondary and $200 for primary. And then that yearly levy goes a little bit smaller each time you go through. If you're a school in Sale and Ballarat, that's something that you're going to need to talk to your Aboriginal education officers, well, basically Peter and Jeanette and Helen, about what happens there. Now, as with anything, if you're going to run a program successfully, you need to allocate a budget for it. So to make sure that that joining fee and that yearly levy is part of your budget going forward. Keeps the finance people happy. Once you've paid your invoice, then you get access to the fire carrier Dropbox. So that's shared with the school. So this is where lots and lots of information will go. And I've done this to try to make it as easy as possible. If you think of something that you need, let me know and I can do it and then put it up on the Dropbox to share with everybody. So we have the resources from the Aboriginal Catholic Ministry. So because they did initially run the fire carrier program, and it's moved across to us. So any of those resources that are in there. Around the campfire newsletter. So when you've signed up, I will add you to the list and you'll get the newsletter, which comes out depending on what's happening and around significant dates, lots of resources that you can then share with other staff members at your school. And I've just put the old ones up there. The commissioning ceremonies. So what happens at a commissioning ceremony? So your first commissioning ceremony and then the successive commissioning ceremonies will be at your school. So you'll hold them in-house. You'll carry that fire from one person to the next. Great resources about writing your covenant. Education resources, I've put lots of stuff in there, and that folder can be shared with all staff. And that's got things on it like Victorian and Australian based resources, podcasts. It's got resources for spirituality. So looking at NATSIC, which is the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Catholic Council. So that's got resources in you if you're looking for First Nations spirituality, prayer, liturgies, all of that sort of stuff. Any of the events, so things like what's going to happen for this if we do anything, other stuff. Fundraising. So this will have your links to posters or resources or QR codes or links to the Raisley website, and your other folders and that there too. So you'll also have any information from the Opening the Doors Foundation. So if there's flyers that come out, they'll go in there as well. And any past webinars and presentations that we have done can go in there and you can have access to those. So it's pretty well on-demand PL. So, I mean, you're getting pretty good resources for your money's worth, I think. So then the next thing you can do is, sorry, I've got a few things on my screen going in the wrong spots. Present the fire carrier program to all staff. So this is where you can use that PowerPoint, the presentation that's in there, and adapt it to your staff so that they know, because it is a whole school thing. And I first came across the program when I worked at Awala College, And it wasn't until I left Avalon and went to another school and I noticed what was missing, because it was so through everything. And I think, it's really important to have that staff buy-in and ownership of it too. All right. So, as with anything, you've got to have the staff that lead it. So, if the principal's going to be the coordinator or the point of contact on smaller school, that's fine. But often they'll choose someone else to be a coordinator or a joint coordinator. So, some schools I know have that as their co-curricular activity, or instead of doing sport, that person's getting an allocation for it in secondary schools. There's a couple of the primary schools where they have 2 people that are joint coordinators. So therefore that broadens the number of people that, have ownership or access to it. You may also like to start a reconciliation group. So this is a student group and it have encouraged staff involvement in that as well. Some schools have that as part of their social justice group. So reconciliation will go in that. So it's up to you in terms of how you have the rest of your co-curricular and staff responsibilities as to how you do that. It would be great in every school to be able to give staff a time allowance to do something like this, but I know that that's not something that can happen in every school. You also need a covenant working group. So obviously most of the time is going to be straight up. So first up, doing the actual covenant in the first bit, and then it will be coming together to review the covenant every year. So the principal needs to be part of that. Members of the executive, if they're part of that as well, or at least have reviewed the drafts of what the covenant is. And you also need lots of staff to help assist actions throughout the year. So whether it's we're doing a fundraiser on Close the Gap Day, making sure that we've got enough teachers on ground to support the students, but also making sure that those students are doing that work as well. So any questions at the minute? Okay.
Sorry, Lisa, I do have a question. It took me a while to press the button. Sorry about that. Can I just, I'm writing down the things, obviously, as you're speaking. We present the fire carrier program to all staff. That's to introduce it that we're going to become a fire carrier school. And that would be the invitation then for staff if they were interested in being part of the covenant committee and things like that. Is that the order of it? So before we do anything, we should aim to do it. And thinking of this timing, if we wanted to be a fire carrier school, I mean, I don't know if this is possible, but, like so that we're on the road to getting commissioned next year, how long kind of does that take, do you think? Like if you had a meeting, it's week 6 now, isn't it, of term 3, and then you think, all right, if you had a meeting, how long do you think it takes to put a covenant and things together?
A covenant takes as long as it takes. And I know that sounds like that's that piece of string thing.
Yeah.
But it's a really important thing. A lot of conversations will happen around the covenant. And I will be doing 2 more webinars about what the covenant is. And I would prefer the covenant to take a longer time and to be authentic, rather than, okay, let's just tick a few boxes and we've got our covenant.
Oh, yeah.
That's not, and that's sort of what I said. And it depends. And why I say it depends is that some schools are already on a really good reconciliation journey now, even before the fire carrier program, whereas some are just starting on it. So it depends where you are. It depends on what else is going on in your school. I know there was a school I was working with and they're about to have their 50th birthday. So they've got a lot of things to worry about. So it depends on what else is happening in the school. It's also primary and secondary with the differences of times on when schools get busy. So it's sort of like how long's a piece of string. I know that doesn't answer what you are asking, but you need to take the time it takes for it to be an authentic covenant.
Okay, so obviously we don't want to rush it, and there's no
No.
rush or anything from your things to think they've signed on, but there's still nothing happening. So we take our time with it. And when do we get the invoice for it so that we can access this?
What school are you?
I'm at St. Peter's Cranbourne.
So I think are you in Sale?
Yeah, in the Sale Diocese, yeah.
Okay, Peter and I will work that one out with you.
Okay, no worries. And then we can access
It's
these.
sort of a bit confusing because we've had the Mac schools, which sort of has a slightly
Yes.
different procedure because we're new into Sale and Ballarat. That's
Yep,
something that we're working out through Peter in
that's
Sale,
fine.
and we're working through Jeanette in Ballarat.
Oh,
So
great.
any of you Ballarat people, that sort of works with you too.
Oh, good, because that'll give us an idea as well when we have a look at those folders. Then I might think it was self-explanatory, the answer to my question, but I'll leave it now. Thank you.
And that's not a problem. All right. So, one of the important things is writing of the covenant, and that takes as long as it needs to take. And as I said, it depends on how many other things are happening at the moment. Obviously, if you said, let's get the covenant happening and it's report writing time or exam time in high schools, it's not going to happen. And so, what I've done is it's actually split up into sort of two sections, and you can start working on each of those sections. So one of the first things to do is review where you are currently at the moment. So what's working and what's not. But this is also a time when you can celebrate what you're already doing. And as I said before, some schools are way down that reconciliation journey and they see the Fire Carrier program as a really nice way of tying everything together, whereas some schools are starting. So it depends on where you are at. So one really good thing to do is you want ownership, and buy-in, and every staff member, whether it's the principal or whether it's the maintenance who mows the lawns and moves the chairs, they are just as important. Their input on what they think a culturally safe school is and what reconciliation actions are needed. And the students are important in this too. And so this is where those child safe standards come into it, with you've got student involvement in making those decisions. So the old fashioned butcher paper and pens, or you can do it electronically if you like, but I think when you do something on a computer, sometimes it loses it. But look, it's up to you which way you find it the easiest, but definitely get student workshops. And a lot of staff do it as one of their PL days. They'll set aside some time to actually work on some of the covenant actions. Then all that information needs to be compiled and then worked out which ones can we do. So there's going to be actions that are going to take years to complete. There's going to be actions that you can say, well, we already have that. Tick, let's put that on the box, and we have that. So then your covenant will be drafted, and I can help out anytime you want to send me a draft. I can do some comments or have a meeting and send it back to you with ideas, but also helps when resources for where to go to actually complete your actions. And then once you've sort of done that in 12 months' time, then you will review your covenant. So that's sort of what happens there. So a couple of things to sort of consider is the student leadership model. So it is a special leadership position. Some schools have their social justice person is their reconciliation captain. Someone calls it fire carrier captain. I actually had one school had their school logo and the badge on it like our staff ID with fire carrier captain on it too, which I thought was really great. So it may be a couple of students, or it may be just one or two. So these are the student leaders. So these are the ones that will be part of the reviewing of the covenant and part of actually achieving those actions of the covenant. So to be commissioned is to actually go through the fire ceremony, and that's a really, really wonderful thing to do. And anyone who's been part of it, it's a very special day. So here's a couple of leadership models, because I know primary schools and secondary schools are a little bit different. So I've seen it where, say, there's just one captain, just like you have a sports captain or an RE captain or an SRC captain or that. So captain or captains, so a 1-year position. I've also seen some primary schools have had a grade 5 and a grade 6 captain. And what that means is that because they're in the program for the 2 years, when they're reviewing that covenant, because it's a living document and we're working on it all the time, that's a really nice way of keeping momentum going. And it's the same with staff. If you gave it brand new to a staff member every year, it would take a while to get up and running. So you want to keep that momentum happening. If you have First Nations students in your school, it would be great to have them involved. But remember, this is an invitation, not an obligation. So they may not feel comfortable to be up the front as the fire carrier captain. They may want to be part of the reconciliation group, or they may not want to at all, and that is fine. So, that invitation, not an obligation. Or you may have a small group of students that are part of a reconciliation group. Like I know there was one of the schools that was recently commissioned. They had 5 amazing students that applied for the position. And they couldn't really split or find the one that was number 1. So they said, okay, we'll just have 5 of you, and those 5 were commissioned. So, it depends on what your other leadership structure is for your students in your school as to what works best for your school. And I'm happy to have a conversation with you about, which works best. Same sort of thing with secondary student leadership. It depends on what your other student leaderships are. So you can do the year 12s or year 11 and 12. And I know that's the way they ran it at Avila, and it was as the staff leader of that, it made it so much easier having at least that one student that went for 2 years that brought all of the other students with them. So that was really good. First Nations students, that, if again, invitation, not an obligation. I was very lucky at Avila. There was a couple of the students there. They were really happy to be part of the reconciliation group, but they didn't want to be fire carrier captains. So, it allow people to fit where they want to fit. Another school have those students that commissioned that attended a cultural immersion. So as part of going on their cultural immersion, when they came back to school, they had to look at how they could spread their experiences. So that's another way you can do it. You could even have a small group of students part of a reconciliation group or a social justice group or your religious groups, anything like that. The thing we have to do, I know, like with Avila, we had about 40 students that used to come and go to our reconciliation group. So they were part of the great big student body that were supporting our leaders. So, if you want to make it so it's a really special job, and being commissioned is special to be leader, but everyone has a responsibility to carry that fire. And your application process will depend on what your other leadership positions are. A written application or an interview. Why do you want to become a fire carrier? So, I know there's a lot of students out there that like to have badges, but you want to have students that actually want to live the badge and not just have it as just something to decorate their uniforms. And so this is where you might get them to describe an action that they might lead for reconciliation. That's another, example of what can they do or what can they bring as a leader of a reconciliation or as a fire carrier leader. You might like to establish a reconciliation group. I know Avila still is. I was at Aquinas for the long walk, and so I got the photo of their banner, so I might as well use a picture for you. So they've got a really strong reconciliation group too. So that's mainly student led, but staff supervised. And you can decide whether that reconciliation and those actions fit under SRC, under social justice, or whether they have their own group. And it depends on the size of the school too. Um, and also how many staff you can run it, because you all need to eat, and over lunch times and that. So, is it something that you can do as part of that? Um, all the staff can then access the Dropbox. So there's the education resources, which if we've got time at the end, which I'm not sure, there's lots of stuff I can go in there. So that's part of your yearly levy, is being able to access all these different resources. All right. One of the commitments when you had the principal sign the letter is for fundraising. So it's fundraising and awareness raising of the Opening the Doors Foundation. So, that's a really important thing. Now that we're with the Opening the Doors, we really partner with the Opening the Doors and support them. And especially seeing the number of students applying now is so big. There was over 1,000 students applied for grants. And yeah, it's huge when you think, in the last 24 years, there's been over 10,000 students have been supported through the program. But unfortunately, as cost of living is getting higher, the needs are higher, and it's all philanthropic. So, no government funding for this. So, this is why we need to sort of think about that. And I think that's that Catholic Catholic teaching of caring for others and thinking about others and supporting others. And I think, it's a really nice way of moving forward. The last 2 years, we've actually had an online platform where you can donate. And the good thing about this is it's online. I don't know about you, but I don't have spare cash or $2 or $5 sitting in my wallet all the time. So it's an easy way of getting your school community to donate. I know last year, Avila Year 7, that was their chosen charity. And each of the homerooms had their own team, and it became a bit of a competition about who could earn the most amount of money as well. And this year too, we also had QR codes. So that meant that you could put a QR code on a poster or in a newsletter, and then people were able to donate. And the advantage is you've also got your receipts for tax deductible donations over $2. So a lot of people sort of like that, especially sort of August sits around the time of the year when you're thinking about doing your taxes. So, and lots of information resources there about how to go through that program. All right, so starting the school covenant, that's the next sort of little bit to do. So I will go through in a lot more detail in the next webinars, because I've split it into 2 pieces. So completing a school audit is what you've already done. So what you've achieved, how you can build on these actions. The 2 sections are our school and our covenant. So our school is a background to your school. So who are you? Where are you? Where's your school located? Why is reconciliation important to you? If you are a school that is a particular order school, what is the philosophy of the order that fits into that? You do your school's acknowledgement of country, part of that. And I'm really excited now with the registered Aboriginal parties, so that's whose country you're on. There's now a new coloured box, so Wamba Wamba are up the top near Swan Hills up there, so they're online as well. So all of my PowerPoints are now no longer valid with that picture on it. So unfortunately, there are still some places where the traditional owners have not been formally recognised, and so Peter and Jeanette in Ballarat and I can help you out, working what country you're on. This is where you also include what your models are, who's on the working party, when are you going to review it. A lot of schools, secondary schools, choose to review their covenants as the year 11s are going into year 12. So that time when the year 12s are just about to head in their exams and that transition time. And so that way the covenant is reviewed by the students then, but it can be reviewed by staff at the end of the year or at the start of the year. So this goes, are you setting up a reconciliation group? So this is sort of like the running. How are you going to run it at your school? Are you going to have frequent reconciliation or just ad hoc when you need it? So will you have a group or a day set up for when you're doing NAIDOC week, which is after school? So, you know, all those sorts of things. When you're going to have your brainstorming workshop, so get together as staff and try to work out what your actions are and what you would love to do, would love to happen. And for me, it's dream big and then do it more achievably. So everyone I speak to when I went to SAIL, all the office staff wanted to come to Mungo for an immersion trip to Mungo. Unfortunately, that would be not possible, but you might be able to find something that's local. So a school that's in Melbourne might be able to go into the Koori Heritage Trust for the day and have a cultural immersion there. So, you know, you can look at what the big picture and then, okay, let's do something that's doable. Also do a student workshop. So this is where, you know, their ideas and what they would like to see comes into it. And short-term and long-term goals, that's probably best done after you've done your actions. But what are your main things that you want to get out of your covenant for that year? And your covenant, it's not something that you finish, put on the shelf, put some great artwork on it. It's actually something that you're going to use and adjust and change all the time throughout the year. You're going to have your actions for each of the core values. And so that's the cultural awareness and understanding, spirituality, and practical reconciliation and justice. So you'll be looking at each of those 3 core values. And some of your actions will actually go over more than one. That's okay. Send a draft to the working party for comment, so both staff and students. And you might also like to include your community in that, especially your First Nations families. Again, that invitation, if they would be like to be part of, you know, saying what goes in the covenant. And you're also going to send a draft to myself so I can have a bit of a look at it and, you know, help you out if you need anywhere. And then when you've completed it, celebrate, because it's going to be a big piece of work. And it's a really big commitment and it's exciting. And, you know, if you might like to have a particular date and have a launch party for your covenant, make it sort of the bells and whistles, or have it in assembly or something like that, that really shows how important the covenant is. All right. So once you've done your covenant, now it sort of depends because commissioning dates happen infrequently, so usually once a term. And with the schools that are in rural areas, that's a little bit different. But if you're in Melbourne, you come into the ACM at Thornbury, and if you haven't been in there, it's the most beautiful place, and it's a very, very special place. I think maybe that would be a really good activity or action to add to your staff, is to do a staff day with the Aboriginal Catholic Ministry. Then once you've had your... Sorry?
It's Peter. Can I jump in for just 2 seconds? For the schools in SAIL, we'll hopefully do commissioning ceremonies with networks of schools. That's the dream, is to, you know, for groups of schools to get together and we'll have a commissioning ceremony together. So we'll plan that out in the future.
Yeah. So, I mean, that sort of depends on who signs up, who's doing it, where's the central school. There is a really good Bunurong cluster in Melbourne, and that's where primary schools and secondary schools come together. And that's the other thing that I really like about the Fire Carry program being in primary and secondary, is that there's such a opportunity to have that interaction between the secondary schools and their feeder primary schools as well. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a big road trip, carrying the fire around Victoria. But we were planning to have this done term 3, but life has got in the way, and schools have got busy in that as well. So hoping maybe end of this year, start of next year, that will be confirmed. But it will be in a place near you. And it'll be a whole day activity too. So we actually workshop with the students and what it means to be a fire carrier, and you work on your covenant there as well. So it's more than just have the ceremony and go. This is what one of the Bunurong clusters art teachers made, because we're in the the drama room, which had lovely flammable curtains. So they made this beautiful fire for us to be used as part of our fire ceremony. But I do have lots of information on the Dropbox about how to make a safe inside fire. And I was a science teacher too, so I know about risk assessments and all of those kinds of things. But this is an alternative if you don't think or you can do it outside. So that will happen wherever you are. And once you've been commissioned by a representative, then you will be able to commission others at your school. So if you're in Melbourne and you can only bring 2 students, and you've got 5 students that are going to be commissioned, then those 2 students you've bought can then go back and commission the others. So, or you can do it again in front of all of your school community or your school's assembly. So, once you've got the fire, then you can pass that fire on to others. All right, so getting to the end of it, because I'm looking at time. Meet with staff and students to complete the actions during the year. So, this is why, okay, what's coming up in term 1, what's coming up in term 2, significant dates throughout the year, and what are you going to do with your actions and when? And that's all sort of set out when you do your covenant. Celebrate your achievements. You've done really well. It's a lot of work, but it's really, really worth it. And we're really excited to have so many more schools come on board. Peter and I and Jeanette and Auntie Vicky and Sherry and that have been working on across Victoria for a long time. So it'll be really exciting when we get to the stage where we can say all of the schools have got the Fire Carrier program.